Welcome to Unscrew the News. It's Bruce Scholl, and I'm coming to you from the greatest province of Alberta, the beacon of freedom, the resistance to the one world control. What an amazing time that we are living through. I'm excited to have my next guest. I reached out to him because he was interviewed from a friend of a friend, and he is an expat living on the beautiful island of Bahamas. I guess it's one of the islands. Geez, I don't know enough about the Bahamas. Eleuthera, I think is that. You know what? He's going to have to explain that to me. But I'm excited to have, somebody that has a view of Canada that sort of that resilient, libertarian sort of mindset. So he's also an author of some great books, and his name is David Skarica. You know what? He's written this great book. I think it looks great. I'm looking forward to reading it. Profit from Pessimism is the name of the book. Anyway, I want to welcome to the stage here in 1 second. Sorry. Hold on, David. Hold on. Hold your horses. But before we get started, I do want to say I'm not your investment advisor, but I do suggest having gold and silver in your hand. Me and my family, that's what we do, making sure that we are, I guess, protecting our wealth. Holding gold and silver just really is a good thing to have. Don't hold that paper shit. I suggest nuggetstacker.com, a good friend of mine here in Calgary. You can buy it from him. He'll send it right out to you, but you can also give him a call if you have any questions. 1-866-644-2121. Give him a call. Ask him about gold and silver. All right. Welcome to the stage, David. It is a pleasure to have you, sir. I am so grateful. Oh, look at that. Look at that flag behind you. What the hell does that say there?
Even in the Bahamas, I have to fly that proudly. And just so you know, I haven't been a Canadian resident for about 20 years. So
you determined it early on.
Well, I'll tell you the little backstory on that. So first of all, to get what you're talking about, back to what you were talking about. Yeah. So I live in the Bahamas. I don't live in Nassau, which is where most people would live. I live in an island. It's larger in size, but smaller in population, called Eleuthera. So Eleuthera is actually the Greek word for freedom. And so there is, and it was actually the first island that was really settled in the Bahamas. Because again, if you look at it on a map, we're more east than Nassau. So if you were on a boat, Spanish or British, you would hit this island first before you hit Nassau, right? Yeah, because it's right in the Atlantic. Like basically the next piece of land, if you look east, is Africa. Like there's no other islands between us and there, essentially. So anyhow, I've lived here for about 13 years. I lived in Nassau for about 6 years. I think this September is actually the 20th anniversary of me moving here. And Eleuthera, if you like freedom, it's really cool. It's like, there's no traffic. There's only 10,000 people on the whole island. There's beautiful beaches. There's not a lot of rules. Like, I'm not trying to condone this, but you can have a beer, you can have a glass of wine while you're driving your car. You're not going to get traffic tickets or parking tickets. And like I said, it really is kind of like freedom.
Yeah.
And there's this cool. I live close to this thing called the Glass Window Bridge. People can look it up. It's very cool. It's to me, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. It's actually where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Caribbean Sea. So the one side of the bridge is like this beautiful, like blue turquoise water, and the other side is like the deep, dark water of the Atlantic. So to get into this, because this is going to be a little bit different conversation for me, because usually I talk about stocks and investing and markets, but I think we're going to talk a little more about what's going on in Canada and that sort of thing. So I'm a little weird in that I started reading these books. You're talking about gold and silver. I'm 47. In the early 90s, when I was a teenager, about like the debt problems then. If you remember Ross Perot in the United States in 1992, ran the deficit was one of his issues. And then there were these books called Bankruptcy 1995 by Harry Figge, The Great Reckoning by James Dale Davidson, that were talking about the issues with debt. And of course, in the mid 90s, Canada got downgraded by Moody's. And, Canada was actually quite a basket case compared to the States at that time.
Yeah.
So anyhow, so I was always interested in gold, and obviously being from Canada, you're in Alberta, the oil resource sector, there's a lot of there's a junior mining sector. Of course, that's mostly based in Vancouver. At that time too, when I was starting out, we had the big Bre-X and diamond field booms and the junior miners. So that kind of stirred my interest in it. But I also kind of was weird in that I never went through that phase of my life where I was like a left-wing socialist teenager. I was like, and I wasn't even just a conservative. Since I'd say, for over 30 years, since my mid-teens, I've been like a libertarian. I remember we were on vacation in North Carolina in 1996, and a guy named Harry Brown, he used to also write financial investing books. Yeah. He was running for the Libertarian Party in the United States. And he has a great book I recommend too, by the way, called Why Government Doesn't Work. Yeah. And this whole thing with Doge, which is a joke, like you should see Harry Brown's budget. It's like, that's a real, slash and burn budget that, he obviously never got elected, but I've never seen this Harry Brown's guy, a sign in front of this guy's house. And at that time, I think I was like 18 or 19 years old. And I go running up to the guy's house and I'm like, Harry Brown, in Canada, no one votes libertarian. I was like, he was like, this, he probably thought it was weird because I was so excited. And we were going to this famous restaurant that had like one of those hour waits. Yeah. So I just talked to the guy for an hour and we were just talking about government and taxes and all that sort of thing. So two things I always couldn't stand about Canada were taxes and cold weather. I'm from near Hamilton, right? Yeah. And so I always kind of wanted to move. And then I was working with a guy on a website. Actually, it was like a kind of free market website back in the 2000s. That didn't work out. And he was based out of kind of Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, kind of South Florida. And I didn't really like it there. I was like, this is kind of to me like Toronto, but South, like it's a rat race. And I remember in 1997, I went to Bahamas on vacation again when I was about 20. And I liked it a lot. And then luckily, so when my father, who was in politics as well, by the way, he was in the Harris government. Yes. He had an assistant who had a friend who had a little condo in Nassau. And it was like on the ocean. It was nothing fancy, and it wasn't overly expensive. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go live in this condo, see if I like it for like a year or two. And then that was 2005. And then by like within 6 months, I was like, yeah, I'm going to move here. And then I kind of got sick of Nassau because, again, I'm from a small town. I'm actually from Dundas. Mm-hmm. And so then basically, then I was like, I want to go on one of these other islands. But see, we have these very small islands here, like Cat Island, Long Island. There's literally nothing to do. 1,000, 2,000 people live there. The nice thing about Eleuthera, there's another island called Exuma, another one called Apico. These kind of islands have, 10, 15, 20,000 people. There's resorts, there's little bars. There's enough to do that you won't go, stir crazy, with nothing to do. So I went to Eleuthera. Actually, when I took my car over, I saw the sunset on that same bridge I mentioned. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to move here. And back then, real estate was, and like Canada, real estate has gone up here a lot. It was very reasonable. Like I have a house on a half an acre that's about 2,300 square feet. And because, again, I told you the island is so thin. Yeah. And I'm on a 100-foot hill. I can see the Atlantic and Caribbean. I see the sunset and sun, rise. Oh, wow. It's really cool. And the thing about it is I bought my house for like probably just over $300K at the time. And it's like, and I've done a lot of upgrades. The guy I bought the house from did not build it well. But anyhow, long story short, probably that was worth close to, 7 figures. And I was like, it would be, I think between 800,000 and $1 million kind of thing. Yeah. And like I said, that was just lucky. I in 2011, I decided to do that for lifestyle reasons. But if you go look at a chart, especially in the U.S., Bahamas real estate kind of just trades with the U.S. That was the low of real estate. And we only have 10-year mortgages here. So I essentially got 10 years of the rates being at near zero. Wow. Yeah. Here they were higher. Like here, the rates are a little higher. I paid a couple percent more, but I was always laughing at that because in 2022 is when the Federal Reserve and the Canadian Central Bank, started raising interest rates because of inflation, because of all the money they printed during COVID. Correct. And I was like, and it was August 2021 when I paid off my house. I was just like, yeah, great.
You just skimmed under.
Yeah. So like, and I also too, to say why I moved, again, it was the weather, taxes, but I also didn't like the idea that Canada has this big social welfare state. You have the baby boomers retiring. We have a PC culture was a bit of a thing then. I didn't like that either because I'm a non-PC. We were talking, I was telling you off air, like I love SCTV and Trailer Park Boys and like Sam Kinison and Ronnie Dangerfield and that kind of comedy too, right? So it's like, anyhow, so I didn't like that part of it. But I have to say, as negative as I was, and the reason I moved and became a non-resident, obviously, too, as a non-resident here, I pay no income tax. You know? So, but also the one thing that scared me or has shocked me is, as negative as I was 20 years ago, it's way worse than I thought I'd ever get. You know, with the way too high levels of immigration, the total, like the woke culture, the PC, you got to be scared, lack of freedom of speech, obviously what happened to the truckers. It's absolutely insane to me how far it's gone.
Are you just sitting there having your glass of wine and having popcorn and watching what the hell, how Canada is a ball of fire and burning up, or
it upsets me a bit for two reasons. Number one, my father is still there. My father is my best friend. He's a judge.
Yeah.
You can look him up. His name is Tony Skarica. Like I said, he was in the Harris government for 2 terms. And he bitches and complains about all the taxes he has to pay, about how there's no freedom. In Southern Ontario, I was like a total rat race. It's basically like the highways in Southern Ontario are like, what the freeways in LA. It's like LA without the good weather.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like all of these things, and obviously crime's gone out of control too. And also being in mining and doing a lot in junior mining, there's so many restrictions and all this stuff that Trudeau put in to hinder the industry. I've noticed the industry really has gone, even gold at 3,300 and silver at 33. You should be able to make a crap load of money in junior mining and drilling and mining, but you can't because of all the regulations. So that, for those two reasons, I'm not a huge Polivert fan, because I'll tell you the analogy I'll make in a second, but I didn't want him to win because he'd be good for the oil and gas industry and he would have been good for mining. And that was the main reason I wanted him to win. And that, again, was the difference between Harper and, like, say, Trudeau, right? Is that Harper obviously was much more friendly to mining, oil and gas, et cetera. But the analogy I use for Canadian politics is I would use 45-yard line. But again, you're in Canada. So let's use 50-yard line, right? And anyhow, these parties to me play between the 50-yard line. It's like 10 yards, right?
Yeah.
Because the welfare state is so big, taxes are so high. Actually, the Harris government, they cut income taxes by 30% provincially, 30. That Polivert tax cut was like basically a certain amount before whatever, a certain amount you make. It would have equated to like $900 a year, right? It's like really nothing. It's like, and I think you just need a real drastic overhaul of the government. And I don't know if you know who David Rosenberg is. He's a famous economist, right? He said, we all know the debt is bad, but actually the deficit at the federal level, even though it went out of control, it's still much lower than most OECD and G7 countries, right? It's a percentage of GDP. He said, what I would do is just slash the income tax, the federal income tax. And even if you have bigger deficits for a few years, that's going to attract all kinds of high-end, the good immigration, the people that are going to start businesses and hire people and attract a lot of investment. And that's what he was saying. And I think that's the issue. Until I see significant changes in that sort of thing, that should happen. And by the way, with the Conservatives, it's a joke. It's like, O'Toole, Scheer, Polivert.
Yes.
Or I don't know if you ever read Stein, Mark Stein, right?
I've read some of his stuff.
Yeah, he calls Polivert pussy bear.
Don't you think that the CPC, the Conservatives, and I'm conservative, I would think in my views, probably I'm leaning closer to libertarian, but gold continues to surge to new highs as stocks fall. The threat of a global trade war is here, and you need to protect your savings. Stop trying to time the market and start buying today. Nuggetstacker.com. I mean, the Conservatives that you saw, they're basically liberal light, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's what they are. Like, I think Polivert talks more like a real conservative than, say, O'Toole or Scheer did, right? Yeah. But even Harper, like my dad always says, and I always tell that I have a good buddy in Vancouver, knows Polivert, and I say, when was the last time you guys did a massive income tax cut? There was some kind of surtax that Paul Martin cut. And my dad said, being an upper income earner for 30, 40 years now, being a Crown attorney, he said that was the last time he saw a significant tax cut. Other than his own Mike Harris tax cut was not saved him like 10 grand a year or something in income tax. And he says he's just sick of he's making hundreds and hundreds of thousands, having this huge tax bill. And then every time they do, we're going to do tax cuts for people who make under 60 grand. And he hates that. And I hate that, especially because in Canada, the high rate kicks in so much. And what I'm trying to say, you're saying like you're conservative, almost libertarian.
Yeah.
Why pussyfoot around? Why be scared that, if we talk about cutting government and we talk about massive tax cuts, moderate people won't vote for us. Who cares? It's not working anyhow.
Right. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think Poilievre is very politically inastute. He did not read the room. He did not see that everything changed.
Right.
To Trump, right? And he was still running on the same platform. And let's face it, a lot of reasons the Liberals won it was just the NDP vote going to the Liberals, right?
But don't you think that they targeted Pierre Poilievre with they painted him with Orange Man Bad syndrome, right?
Yeah.
So, and instead of actually embracing it, I think he should have embraced it and said, yeah, you know what? I am for cutting taxes. I am for, creating businesses. I am for getting rid of, and instead of shying away from it, being afraid.
Yeah,
of it.
and I think he could have done it. He could put it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
He could also attack Trump, saying he's not a real conservative because he's not for free trade. He's for these high tariffs, right? Yeah, he's already. We did a deal with him. Or I say, still calling we as Canadian in 2018, and now he's trying to redo the deal 7 years later. Which, that is BS, right? Like when you do one of those trade deals, like they did with NAFTA, those things are supposed to last 20 to 30 years, right? You can't. So how he can just rip it up at any time and then like redo it again. And I would have just even gone after him a little personally, because then you would have looked like you're standing up to him. Like I know a lot about Trump, and he ran 4 casinos into the ground, and I would talk about stuff like that and just say the guy's inept or incompetent or something, and like on it from that angle as well. And another reason I think he's politically astute is that he was going after Singh way too hard. Right. You actually didn't want to go after Singh because you wanted those NDP voters to kind of stay over there, right? Yeah. So that was, and I think that's why Singh went after Poilievre so hard, because Singh knew, okay, I'm done, right? But I'm going to make it so, especially because Singh worked with the Liberals so long, I'm sure he's going to have some kind of patronage appointment job waiting for him, right? Because no offense, he's a sleazebag, so
nobody takes offense to that. He is a sleazebag.
So, and then also, even with his own writing, again, I know the people that are big time Poilievre fans and conservative fans, they'll be like, they targeted the writing. This. I'm like, as a politician, you have to know, like, this is happening. And he should have waken up and seen that and spent some more time in his writing. And also, here's my other thing. I told you my father ran 2 terms. He got 55 and 58% of the vote, 95 and 99, the 2 times he ran, right? Mm-hmm. And it's actually writing that's not overly conservative. Went liberal for a long time after he resigned on a matter of principle. We can talk about that in a second. But like, I think that if you lose your own writing especially as the leader, you should just go away. You should just resign. You can't win your own writing. I'm sorry. Now you're going to go to some writing that votes 80% conservatives to stay in power. And another thing, I think Pierre's a nice guy. Don't get me wrong. Right. And I think he means well. But again, another issue I have with him is I don't like career politicians. I don't like Nancy Pelosi. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't like Mitch McConnell. I don't like people that their whole life is this. And he's been there for over 20 years now. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, go into the private sector and do something else, like at this point.
Well, this is how we reform. And, moving towards what I'm hoping to talk more about is obviously Alberta independence. And, I'm hoping that when we finish with the referendum and we say, okay, now where do we go, is that we have that blank canvas and we can say, you know what, this is what government should look like. And you should have a term, and you should come to us with some experience in the real world. Right. This is what we should ask for from a politician. Is it somebody that ran a business?
They do that kind of in Singapore. In Singapore, they pay the prime minister like millions of dollars a year. Right. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that attracts a lot of business guys do it, because what the reason is they're like, well, I'm going to make $2 or $3 million a year as the prime minister. So it's not a big downgrade, from my private sector job. If you look at guys like Jeff Bezos or I know that Gates is a liberal, but like, or Zuckerberg or whatever, these people are billionaires or Warren Buffett. Why would they want to run for politics? Have to through all that scrutiny and make way less money. Same thing in Canada. Like they play the system, but why would one of the Brofmans, want to run for, when they can just make billions of dollars, right? And so you're attracting people. And obviously another reason I think you're not attracting the best candidates is, quite frankly, like my dad was someone, because he was very popular in the area. He would have considered maybe running for prime minister or something like that, but he doesn't really speak French. So the fact that you have to speak French, that gets rid of, like, Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank guy. Sure. He's messed around with it. Well, he'll never run because he doesn't really speak French, and that caters you right there, And
well, thank God we won't have that requirement in Alberta. I can tell you.
And by the way, I do love Quebec. I love the culture. My mom's from there. She's from Montreal. I love the smoked meat. I love the bagels. I love all that stuff. But their policy,
I love Quebec too. Like,
and it's a unique mix of Europe and North America. There's really no other place like that, maybe other than New Orleans in North America. But they're also taking down the country. But as we also talked about, another thing about Alberta independence off air, I looked at it just recently, and I don't know if you know this, but like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, they get the transfer payments about 3x per capita more than Quebec does. So I know people see the number in Quebec's the biggest, because Quebec's got almost 10 million people. Like basically, like they're getting a third the money in Nova Scotia, and they only have 1 million people. So they're basically, you guys in Alberta and Saskatchewan and even BC, because BC is a rich province because all the real estate wealth and whatever. Everyone there is supporting these guys over here, and then these guys over here vote liberal all the time because that system benefits them.
That's right. Well, it's creating a leech society, right? So you only benefit if you vote for liberals because they're the ones that continue the system, and so the money supports basically voting for liberals every time, and
And then if we actually go to the independence itself, right? The actual movement, like one thing I'm not on to, Trump, the whole 51st state thing. I don't think if Alberta and Saskatchewan, say, became their own mini country, and maybe Manitoba and BC would join them, right? Afterwards, I don't think you should join the United States. What I think you should do is just become your own small country. And we were talking about this. Then you can become a UAE, Dubai. You can become a Switzerland. You can become, actually, look how even it's a state, but look how rich Alaska is, right?
Right.
You have the revenues from oil and gas and resources. You could almost probably get, I'd have to crunch the numbers, but I think you could almost get rid of income tax in Alberta and Saskatchewan, do a small royalty tax, 5-10% on the oil and gas or potash, uranium production, and then just live. And those companies won't care if they're paying barely any corporate income tax. Just pay that, and that will be enough to support country, because with small populations. Because if you have a small population and you're rich in resources, you're going to be super rich. Norway is the same way, right? You know, and I think there's too much obsession over being landlocked too. Again, Austria and Switzerland are landlocked. They're rich,
Right. So let's get into that, if you don't mind. So what are you seeing as far as Alberta independence? Obviously, one of the stumbling blocks I find is the fear of the population. So there's a lot of, obviously, baby boomers, right? But also people that are, looking at this is one of the I think crazy concerns from people is the CPP. CPP is like, the worst Ponzi scheme. There's hardly any money in there at all.
Yeah. But Social Security is the same way in the States. So yeah.
But they're talking about $1,000, roughly $1,000 per person per month is what you're hoping to get from CPP. And I understand that you've put into it for your whole life, and so you want to get something out of it. But that's the reality. Is it's about $1,000, and guess what? That $1,000 doesn't buy you much today. So our ask here in Alberta is that we're going to create an Alberta pension plan, which obviously, we can then run it better. And I know that there's a promise behind that, but what do you think about that?
No, because what would I think if you had an independence, you would have to make some kind of deal with CPP that whatever the percentage that Alberta has as it, that
Mhm.
money has to be transferred to Alberta and what you've put into it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that would be part of it. And also, again, if you want to really restructure everything, don't do one of these public pension plans. Chile in South America
Yeah.
has, when Milton Friedman went there and met with Pinochet, they have a private pension plan. So what they do is you have your own little account, you
Yeah.
put that monthly thing in the account, and you can buy like a couple of equity funds, some bond funds, just conservative things, and that accumulates in your own account, and that's a much better way to run it. And like, look at, you're talking about $1,000 a month. If you're somebody that's putting in all this money to CPP their whole life,
Yeah.
again, if that accumulated in your own private account, and say just made something simple like 5 or 6% a year, right?
Sure.
You're going to be making probably 4 or 5 grand a month when that actually pays out. So
Right.
you're, like I said, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a pay-as-you-go scheme, and now with the baby boomers retiring, that's a part of the reason there is all this immigration in Canada, because they need people more paying into CPP and other systems, right? And then you have other welfare programs, like you can have you can still keep the public healthcare, but you can have private healthcare. Two-tiered healthcare in Canada drives me crazy that way, by the way.
Mm.
Even countries like UK, Australia that have public healthcare systems, they all have private healthcare systems. And the reason they all have private is that the people with money can go to the private system, and that frees up resources for the public system, right? And there is a private system in Canada. It's called going to the United States.
Or to Mexico. Or to Mexico. A lot of people go to Mexico for treatments.
Yeah.
Right? I know that a lot of people went there for hip and knee replacements because they can get it done in a week, where we have to wait 6 months to even get an appointment here in Canada.
Yeah. Like for example, I kind of a bum knee from a football injury, and I need to get some surgery on it. And because I do live offshore, and I'm a non-resident, I don't get the Canadian healthcare. Like I have like a girlfriend from Colombia, and Colombia is really well known for surgeries, mostly like, whatever, boob and whatever. But they still have good surgeons there. So I can fly to Colombia though, and just like that, get my knee surgery done, So yeah. So, but
I think that's a great point, for Albertans not to be afraid of this, because we have been propagandized to believe that, this free healthcare, and I use the word think obviously loosely. It's not free. It is a complete waste of our money in Canada, or in Alberta alone. I think what we give Alberta Health Services is something crazy like $24 billion a year, and they just piss it away on a monster administration bullshit.
Well, like one thing like that goes on everywhere in Canada, because again, I'm from Hamilton, so there's like one of those pseudo private / public corporations called Hamilton Health Sciences. It was funny when I used to be on Facebook, and I used to look up maybe some people I went to high school with or whatever.
Yeah,
I was like shocked about how many were working for Hamilton Health Sciences, doing useless bureaucratic jobs, making $100 grand a year. And then they complain, there's no nurses and no doctors. And yeah, there is shortages, partly because of the population boom, but partly because they pay all these worthless bureaucrats your tax money. I don't know what they're just, and they really are just paper, pencil pushers, paper pushers, whatever you want to call it. So I think too, like you said, people. See, one thing I talk about in my book is we're not going to talk too much about my book, because we're talking more about.
Well, we have to talk about your book. That's why we have you here.
I have this chapter called chapter 3. It's like hypernormalization. So it's a documentary by a guy in the UK named Adam Curtis. I highly recommend it. And he talks about one reason there is all this discontent all over the world is that the system doesn't really work anymore. You have these asset bubbles. You have stock prices are through the moon. But most people are struggling. There's inflation. I don't think this probably happens so much in Calgary, but you go to the cities like Vancouver, Toronto, New York, London. There's all the rich people own all these like houses and condos, and they're not even in them half the year, right? And all it does is inflate the prices and screw over kind of the locals in the city. And it's so people know something's wrong, and they think it's almost like fake. And there's quantitative easing and buying, keeping, pumping the markets that way and this sort of thing. And the Soviets had the same thing happen to them in the 70s and 80s. The Soviets just weren't these brainwashed people they're made out to be. By the 70s and 80s, people knew this was not working. Like communism was not working, right? And they were told everything was great, but it wasn't. But because they were under communism, there's no freedom of press. they didn't know anything else, right? So they just kind of had to keep going with it. And I think that's kind of what's happening here too, is that we're told, oh, if you get private healthcare, it's going to be so bad. Like the idea I had, you privatize the pension plans. Oh, it's going to be horrible. People aren't going to have pensions. And you're told all this stuff and people have lived in this welfare state system for so long, they don't know anything else, and they get scared of something different. Like, I'll even be blunt with you, on my micro level, moving to the Bahamas is like a tough move. You're moving to a foreign country, even though the Bahamas is pretty North Americanized, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans, everyone speaks English, whatever, right? Only 3-hour flight from Toronto. But like, you're moving to, again, a foreign country, you don't know anybody there, etc. And I always find a lot of my friends in Canada who bitch, whine, and complain about the taxes or weather, they're scared to make that move because it is a lifestyle change or whatever, a culture change as well. And anyhow, so what I'm trying to say, where I think equates to the Alberta separation is, I think it equates to you guys that like people are scared because it's something different. And like, that's why I also say, just to go back to that point, like, I know a lot of people say, oh, just join the States. I said, don't join the States, because you'll be your own little country. You have all this resource wealth. And like, look, I know like a lot of Canadians who hate Trudeau or big conservatives just want to like Trump because of Trump. But I'm just telling you, as someone who does economics and someone who's libertarian, Trump is like the most anti-free market president of like the last 100 years, even more so than like, say, Obama, Biden, Jimmy Carter, etc. It's like the stuff he's doing and implementing. Like, I have a friend from Chile, actually. And I don't know if you know who was in before Pinochet's Allende. He was a communist. No. My buddy just told me recently, he's like, Trump's doing stuff that Allende wouldn't even do. So it's like he's an authoritarian in a way. And it's like, so what I'm saying is, you don't want to be subject and under their thumb. It's like, I just think if you have these small population provinces with all these resources, and everyone needs those resources. They need potash for agriculture. They need uranium for nuclear power. They need oil and gas for everything. So it's like, you have the stuff people need, and you'll just be your small independent country. And by the way, this is not just like Quebec, who I think kind of does it to hold the rest of the country hostage and get money out of them. This is like, you guys have been screwed over, especially Alberta, for decades and decades and decades. And it's like, by both Trudeaus too. Like, and it's like, enough is enough.
I agree. It's from what I understand, and I'm not a historian, and you seem to have a lot of past knowledge, but it's been almost, from what I understand from listening to some of the other smarter people than I am, 170 years of, one quote from Marco Navarro Jenny told me that when it was originally set up, they said, we want to bring in Alberta and Saskatchewan to help prop up the eastern provinces and to make our life wealthy and comfortable.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what we've been supplying for them, or supplying to them.
And that would be fine if they did something like, oh, we're going to cut capital gains taxes. We're going to cut income tax. Sure. We're going to make it actually easy to mine, Yeah. Okay, if they had these policies like that also benefited you, you can make, okay, maybe we'll subsidize them a bit or whatever. But
that's why we've been here and we've stuck it out for so long. Really,
it's like, if you're like in a marriage and like whatever, you take care of your wife, right? And say, I'm just, but she treats you good and whatever, and it's a good marriage. You don't mind, buying her a nice dress or, giving her allowance or something, just cleaning the house, whatever. I hate to sound like so misogynistic or whatever, but like, if you're in a relationship and the other person is treating him like crap and you're giving them everything, well, then why would you stay in it? Like, actually, and again, a normal person would just leave that relationship. You know? So so
exactly. Well, that's where we are. Anyway, I do want to talk about your book. So let's
if you don't mind, I'm taking off my jacket. Even with my AC blaring, this is again another problem you kind of don't have in Alberta. It is so hot here. I'm just sweating too much. So anyhow,
well, we're cooking. We're cooking this. Yesterday it was 28 degrees, man. It was hot.
That's great. It's actually here. It's very humid, so it's just like. And I don't know if you saw the kind of suit jacket. I'm a huge Miami Vice fan, right? Actually, you're 57. So, and it's like, I have a whole closet full of those kind of jackets. And one thing that's nice about these interviews on the island, I never wear them. Gives me an excuse to wear them. But I saw an interview with Don Johnson before we get back into in my book. And he said that one reason he wore, if you saw, he never wore socks in the show, and
Sure,
he was
sure.
wearing all that linen stuff. He says it was so hot in Miami in the summer. He just tried to wear stuff that was as light as possible, right? So
Right.
yeah. So, but anyhow, to get back to the book, so a lot of the book's probably themes you agree with. I talk about debt problems because the book is published by Humanex, which is the a book publishing arm of Newsmax, which is the big conservative website and news channel in the States. I do focus a lot of the States, but I do talk about Canadian real estate, and I talk a lot about buying gold and silver, et cetera, et cetera. And I talk about, I think we're at this inflection point in the markets where the markets are very expensive, right? There's certain valuations, like there's a valuation I talk about called the Buffett indicator. So this is just taking the size of the economy and divided by the size of the stock market. And right now it's about 200%. At the top, I think back in February, I got 210%. That's the highest level ever, which means that the economy the stock market's never been as more expensive compared to the economy ever. This is, excuse me, more expensive than the dot-com bubble, more expensive than 2021 when they pumped all that money into the system after COVID. And I think we're kind of in this play, kind of like the 1970s or even the 2000s, where gold is now starting to break out. And gold and silver are where to be, and real assets. And then the stock market at some point, it did have that big drop in April. That was a bit of an artificial drop because, it was the whole tariff thing. And then, and it kind of, I guess you could call it the tariff tantrum, like the market tanked over that. Yeah. And then, when you go through 125-year tariffs in like a day, it's going to cause. It's going to
have a little bit of it.
Yeah. But right now, for example, the market's like 3% off the highs. This is actually, I think, where it would have been, but it's done it in a much more volatile way. And I think the real problem going forward, and again, I talk about this in the book, I think actually Trump is way off base in that he's focused on trade so much. Yeah. It's something he's been obsessed with for 45 years. I think the real problem is actually the deficit. Again, the Doge thing, I think Musk, in fairness to him, tried, but there's just no will at the congressional, even and presidential level to really cut spending.
That drives me insane that, I mean, even his party, even the people that believe or tell the people that they're conservative in values, they won't do anything to actually ratify these.
Like actually DeSantis went off, the government of Florida recently saying that, like, you guys didn't do any of it, right? Right. And I think they cut about $25 billion of the non-discretionary spending. So again, getting back to entitlements, U.S. has the same problem, is Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, military, and interest. These are things that basically don't go down, right?
Right.
That's $5 trillion of the $7 trillion budget, right? And non-discretionary spending, which is most of the stuff that Musk was looking at, is $2 trillion, and he cut about $25 billion of that $2 trillion. But the increases of all the other, I heard they're going to increase the Pentagon budget by $100 billion this year or something, right? So, like, and actually, what's funny about that is anyone knows that the biggest waste in the world is the Pentagon. Sure. That's where they have the $20,000 toilet seats and stuff,
right?
So
it's the black budgets that are in there, right?
It's black budgets. Who knows where that money's going?
Who knows?
So it's just so impossible to cut spending. And like, again, another reason I kind of soured on Polliver, he wanted to keep, he was going to keep all that, those dental plans. I'm like, look, at some point you got to get rid of that stuff, because it's costing the government too much money. And the reason Canadians are paying all these taxes is because there's just too much of those social expenditures. And I think, again, I think that most of his base would be like, if he said, that dental plan's gone, they'd be fine. They wouldn't care, Right. But he's trying to appease that middle part of the vote. But when you do that, you appease nobody because they still think you're Trump, orange man, and they're still not going to vote for you. So you might as well just go out and be who. And I think Polliver more actually in principle and his beliefs is kind of like a libertarian or a conservative, right? But he has to rein a lot of them in trying to get elected. Right. But
he sat on the fence too much, don't you think?
Sat on the fence. And it's like, also, if you do that, just so you know, like, you're going to end up, again, appeasing, and you're not going to be true to yourself. Right. So, like, that's the one thing about Justin. I don't even know I think that's why he imploded, because I know people, he's green, crazy guy. I don't think Justin believes in anything. I think he's a narcissist.
Right.
He believes in saying whatever he thinks can get him elected or whatever people want to hear. You know?
Well, I truly think that he thought he was in the club, right? And
Yeah.
he was going to get a ship, or he was going to get a seat on the lifeboat. Is the analogy that I use. I mean, he was told by the likes of probably Klaus Schwab or Bill Gates or whatever. Gold continues to surge to new highs as stocks fall. The threat of a global trade war is here, and you need to protect your savings. Stop trying to time the market and start buying today. Nuggetstacker.com. That,
Exactly.
hey, you know what? You're in the club. You just do what you're told to do, and we'll make sure to take care of you. You'll have a seat in the bunker when we blow the rest of the world up, and you know, you'll be safe. You'll have all the small children that you like.
Um, exactly. But I think the issue is he became so hated and disliked.
Right.
I think they've all kind of thrown him under the bus, and he's not getting any of those kind of jobs, right?
Oh, he won't.
No, he won't, because
No.
he's like a mimbo, you know.
He's a hot potato. He's a hot potato nobody wants.
Yeah, and it's like, again, he's so it'd be one thing like okay, well, Mooney was pretty disliked at the end, but you know, because he was well respected internationally. You know, he was on the board of American Barrick, and like Justin's not getting those jobs, man. He's I don't know what he's going to do. And another issue I think he held on too long, is that he liked the lifestyle. Okay, when if Trump's not president anymore, he can go back to Mar-a-Lago. He can go on his private plane. He can like do whatever, right? If Justin's not, you know, he's got a trust fund. He, you know, got a few million in the bank or whatever, but he doesn't have the money of that lifestyle. He likes going on the Canada Force or Goose or Wine or whatever they call it, and you know, you saw the way he was living when he was offshore, like staying at 5-star resorts. They had like $1 million. Like they're spending all this money on like food, all the fancy food on the plane. He liked that lifestyle at the end. And he probably feels, because of like who he is and his family, he's entitled to that lifestyle. And you know, that's why he held on for so long. And by the way, that was another Paul Revere strategic error. I remember seeing him saying speeches as, you know, remember all the scandals Trudeau has? He's like, Mr. Trudeau to resign. I'm like, no, you do not want Trudeau to resign. You want him to run, because it'll be the easiest victory you can ever have. You know?
Okay, I want to go back to the book and what you've found from your research and for what you've written in the book. So obviously, in the title it says "Profit from Pessimism." So are we at a point where your average person can make profits from this time of the markets?
So, like, I have a unique strategy. So I'll just explain it a bit. So I would consider my main mentor to be a guy named John Templeton, and he actually came up with. He said, "You want to buy at the point at maximum pessimism." So people who don't know who Templeton was, he was American. He's actually from a very poor, like, you know, upbringing. He's very Christian. He ended up building a little investment advisory business, and his first famous trade was in the 1930s. He found 100 companies that were trading under $1 a share. Many of them were railroads. Many of them were in bankruptcy. And he kind of bet that he thought, okay, the war is about to really start, you know, picking up. And the U.S. is basically going to supply the Allies, right? We're going to build tanks. We're going to build planes. We're going to build armies. And then these railroads are going to move again. So he bought these. He borrowed 10,000, which is probably like 200,000 in today's money. Right. And he was very conservative, so he didn't believe in borrowing money, but he was so convinced this was going to happen. He did it. He borrowed it from a colleague. He turned that into 100 grand. And if you go look at the markets over that time, they were basically flat. So he made 10 times his money, because a lot of these railroads came out of bankruptcy. A lot of these, you know, companies which were economically sensitive did well, because even though in the war economies aren't great because there's rationing and stuff like that, but you know, that industrial base did very well. And it kind of, you know, it got out of the lull it had been since the Great Depression, and he made all that money. And he did other things. He bought Asian stocks in 1997 when the Asian markets crashed. He bought a lot of stocks after the 1987 crash. He's got all kinds of famous trades that he did. But basically, there's another study by a guy named May Favor, which ties into this. This guy did a study, and I talk about it in the book, that if you look at stocks or assets, and when they go down between 60 and 90% in price, usually the 2-3 year returns are 100, 200%. So with the markets inflated, I look for now more like individual companies. Like, I'll give you one example, and I talk about it in the book as well. There's a company called Fubo, streaming service.
Yeah.
Living in the area I live in the Bahamas, I can't get cable. So
Right.
I use these, and I love sports, by the way. I love soccer. I love football. I know you're from Calgary, but go Oilers. I grew up,
Oh yeah, I'm a huge Oilers fan right now.
yeah. I grew up in the 80s with like Gretzky and Messier. Actually,
Yeah.
just so you know, I'm doing a little segue. Mark Messier actually owns a resort here, right?
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, I use the service, and first of all, another famous value investor named Peter Lynch, who's kind of based the stuff a lot under Templeton as well. He said one of the things you do is you like a product, and if the product's good, and you like using it, and you see that the stock is cheap, just buy it because you know it's a good product. So this Fubo is an excellent service in my opinion. Like I use it to stream. Their specialty is actually like soccer, like Premier League. My dad was born. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but I have a Leeds. My dad was born in Leeds, so I'm a Leeds United fan. So anyhow, I use this thing all the time. Also, they also do NFL football. I really like the service. I go look at the stock. It's collapsed from $60 in 2021 to $1.50, right?
Yeah.
And they are losing money, but they're growing their top end growth like 20%. And what Fubo wanted to do is they wanted to do what they call the skinny streaming package. So that means they wanted to do a little package where you pay 50 or 60 bucks, and it's just sports. It's just NHL, NBA, NFL, etc., Premier League, etc. And they were trying to work with Fox and Disney and everyone to do this, and they kept saying no. Then Fox, Disney, all these people get together, and they started something called Venue. And Fubo was like, no, you can't do that. We've been trying to get you to do this for years with us. Now you start your own service and tell us we can't be part of it. So Fubo did a class action lawsuit, antitrust lawsuit against them. And they ended up settling. Disney ended up giving all this money, and now they're going to do that service with Disney.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, when they did the antitrust suit, and I read about it, I was like, I think they're going to win this, right? So I was like, they have that. The revenues are growing. It's a good service, and the stock went from $1.50 to about $2.6. I think it's like just over $3 now, but I sold it around $5-6, right? So that's the kind of thing. Because one thing about the maximum pessimism, it's not just buying something cheap. You buy something cheap and it can stay cheap forever.
Yeah.
Kind of like that Templeton trade in that example I gave. You need a catalyst to turn it around. Like for example, people don't realize because now it's such a phenomenal stock. Yeah. In 2002, 2003, Apple had not done anything for 20 years since its IPO. It had been a garbage stock because they were a very bit player. You know, Microsoft took over computers in the 90s. They were a bit player in that. They were just like, they lost a lot of the market share in computers and, Macintoshes or whatever. And then they came out with the iPad or such iPad.
The iPod.
No, not even the iPod. The music thing. I'm sorry, I'm having a
iPod.
iPod, and then iPhone.
Yeah.
The iPod, this is where I was done. I didn't really know this stuff then. I was only in my 20s, right? But when you saw the iPod and how that took off, that was like, okay, that's the catalyst. And then they had obviously the iPhone, iPads, they took over all this whole industry, and it's like, the stock boomed. But what I'm trying to say is Apple did nothing for 20 years because they didn't have the proper product to turn the company around. But once they did, it took off. Like it's even BlackBerry traded for a while and did nothing. But once they came up with the first really quality smartphone, their stock went crazy for 10, 15 years. So you need kind of, I think, a catalyst as well, because like I said, you can have companies that are cheap and they've collapsed, but if they don't have that catalyst to turn them around, that's it. But anyhow, right now the markets are expensive. Yeah. So there's not many of these, but I do find I have 3 companies I own right now. One is financial. This is for paying subscribers. So I can't give everything away. But this is a financial media company, and it trades at 5 times earnings. It has an 8% dividend. I'm up about 40% on it already, right? And it's still cheap. And I think this is kind of thing that can go up 2, 3, 4 times. In the very least, because you have that big dividend, say did nothing. Well, I'll just sit back and collect 8% a year. So and for example, the gold stocks fit in that, even though the gold stocks aren't super low and cheap, they've come off. But if you look at the cash flows they're generating now, one of the big input costs for gold and precious metal companies, miners, is oil and gas. Well, the oil and gas sitting in the 60s, that input cost has gone down a lot. Yeah. And so I've seen it in these gold companies I own. They've had some excellent earnings. And one thing they're reporting is big increases in cash flows, profitability, because their costs are kind of flatlining. The inflation's kind of over from that 2021, 2022, 2023 period.
Yeah.
Their costs are actually flatlining, but the price of gold since late 2023 has gone from 1,800 to 3,300. So I think these gold stocks are really in for like a multi-year bull market.
What do you think about silver? I'm a huge silver fan, and I think that it's undervalued. And
do you know about the gold to silver ratio?
Yeah, it's 100, right? Yeah,
It's
100 to 1.
And that's only I've talked about this a lot in my newsletter.
Yeah.
Actually, two of my larger positions, I don't mind talking about one of them because it's run so much. I don't know if I'd be chasing it up here, but it's a little silvers company called Avino Silver, ASM, on both Toronto and New York is the ticker. And it's gone from like $1 to $3 US since I bought it. And they're increasing their production. Again, silver's at 33. But when you get that gold to silver ratio at like 100 like that, it's like silver is probably going to outperform a great deal in the next 12 to 24 months. Let's say gold roughly can double here to 6,000, right?
Yeah.
In the next 2 years. Well, I think that silver could go to, like 200 or something.
Yeah.
And of course that from these levels is 6 times, right? Or at least go to 150. So like silver can go up 5 to 6 times, and I think that a gold, so it can like more than double or triple here from gold. And by the way, in 2020 when it went to over 100, silver and silver stocks really outperformed gold the next year. And I think the reason we're seeing this in gold and silver is because of what's happening right now with the deficit in the states huge, with Trump kind of angering the rest of the world with his rhetoric of trade wars. Foreigners are not buying U.S. debt. Like the U.S. bond is not rallying. Even during market volatility, interest rates tend to go lower, right? The interest rates on the 10-year bond in the U.S. haven't really gone lower in the last 6 months. And I think it's because foreigners aren't buying. And I think the big money, sovereign wealth funds, central banks, they buy gold. Right. Silver is more retail orientated. And I think that we need this retail money to come into the silver market. And then, like I said, we'll see it really, really outperform. And no one knows when that is going to happen. But I can just tell you, too, again, when it went to 100 to 1 back in 2020, it only stayed there for like a month or two. And I think we're a few weeks into this, maybe a month into this. So I think at some point, in the next few months, we'll start seeing, silver come out of it. And by the way, that's why silver, even on this correction, though, didn't go down as much as gold. Because again, compared to gold, it's very cheap. Yeah, I prefer, if you're, especially if you're going to say buy bullion or the physical, I would definitely be buying silver here over gold.
Yeah. I just think that maybe I can speak to that. Maybe I can ask you about that in regard to. So I see Alberta almost as a lifeboat for a lot of us, because I truly think that Canada is in dire straits as far as economically. Do you see that as well? I mean,
because like there's no investment in Canada. Like the foreign investment is dried up. Actually, one thing that was interesting, I'll tell you in a second, but just to get back to gold for a second before I segue into this.
Yeah.
Remember, Canada has no gold reserves too.
Right.
These idiots sold
it all.
Right. They sold it in 2 tranches. Most of it they sold in the late 90s when it was like 300, right?
Yeah.
And then the next tranche they sold like 10 years ago when it was like 1,200, 1,300, right? So we have no gold reserves at all. So, and like you go look at like someplace like Russia. Russia's been buying, whatever you think of Putin, they've been buying gold like crazy since, over the last 10 years, and that's one reason the Russian economy hasn't imploded, even though the sanctions, because they're making so much money off the gold thing. If they ever wanted to, they can sell some of that and, you pump the money back into the economy or whatever. Right. So, so that's that segue. But no, I think it is in dire straits. Like one issue with Canada too is, and you guys aren't as bad over there, although it has got more expensive. The whole economy was bent on these real estate bubbles, right? Let's face it, most of the major built-up areas are still Toronto. 2 areas are Toronto and Vancouver, and those entire economies are basically built on a house there 20 years ago was, $250,000, and now it's $2 million. And that's kind of what it's been, or 30 years ago or whatever. And that's kind of what it's been built of. And now we're seeing this real estate market roll over. And I think that the gains that people got in their houses, the wealth effect from that kind of hid the fact that there was no real economic growth. There was no real investment, right? And so I do think it's like dire straits. have any real organic growth. Like Canada's not like the US. We don't have a tech sector. We don't, we just basically are mostly like natural resources. And like I said, and then now real estate came into be, right? So,
Yeah.
And we do have industry, we do like have a large car manufacturing industry, but like for the most part,
But that'll dry up because of the tariffs, right?
try up with the tariffs and the whatnot. So, but like I think there is no new investment coming into the country, because if you wanted to start a business, and I'm saying let's say something like, oh, I want to do a little hotel chain.
Yeah.
You're not going to invest in Canada with
Why
all
would
the
you?
red tape and all the taxes and all the.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Did you happen to see that Carney announced yesterday $486 billion spending?
Yeah, I saw that.
was
He had talked about doing that for a while. So, well,
I mean,
remember he was. I think he is going to do one now, but remember for a while he was talking about not doing a budget. You know?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Why would we need a budget?
I think that got too embarrassing for him, right? So,
Okay. So you think he's actually going to come up with a budget?
Like I said, my dad is like was born in the UK, so we both have British passports, so I follow British politics.
Yeah.
I think Carney's just going to end up like Starmer. Like in a year, everybody's going to hate him.
Right. And then he's going to have to backtrack on everything that he said.
Well, the problem with him is he's in a minority government. The Labour Party in the UK has a huge majority, so they don't have to worry about having an election for another 4 years. And remember, like politics is like you're going to smell the blood in the water like sharks, right?
Yeah.
I know everyone just thinks the NDP's done. I don't think they are. I think they'll go back to their normal 15-20%, once they get rid of, and even if they have no money, right? It's just like what will happen is, let's say everyone's hated by Carney's hated by everyone. The Bloc, the Conservatives, and the NDP will all sense this, and they'll just, they'll do a non-confidence vote, and they have enough votes to win, right? And the NDP, I don't think, because they could give them a majority again, they're not going to do it this time, because they're going to be like, well, where did it get us last time? I got it like totally decimated and wiped out, right? Yeah. So like they're not going to do that. So let's say the Liberals fall back to 30% or something, and the Conservatives are in the mid 40s, and the NDP is back at 15-20. I think you would see a non-confidence vote, because they'll know like this is the time to do it. I would see that being in like a year or so. Right? And like I said, I don't really care. Like I talked about that 50-yard line analogy.
Yeah.
And Paul Eleuthera annoys me because I think he should step down, and I think he's too middle of the road. But on the other hand, it still would be better for the country, if that happened. But like with your guys' separation hopes, if they say that doesn't happen and they've got 2 more years of this, I would say the number one policy that would cause Alberta separation is if he does try to put the cap on the oil and gas, energy production. If he puts that cap on, it's over,
Bill C-69, also, the no pipelines. Oh, wow.
No pipelines. I think if you're Alberta, you just got to say that's enough is enough. And actually talking about the UK, I think another similarity is, remember, the mainstream tried to poo-poo like Brexit for years, right?
Yes.
It's never going to happen. It's fringe, it's just that, and then obviously like they got Brexit. And that's the way I kind of view Alberta. Everyone's like, oh, it's not a real thing. But, some of these polls recently are showing like 45, 46% support for it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And those polls are probably underpolling what it really is,
Right.
So,
and who answers a poll today? Honestly, I mean, really.
And most conservative libertarian people say that would be for separation in Alberta, Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
We tend to if someone asks me those questions, I'm hanging up the phone, right? I think it's more the liberal socialist mentality that trusts the government. Like they're the ones who are going to answer those polls. Although I will say the election polling, it was pretty accurate, because everyone kept saying, it's not really like that. Look at the huge amount of people Paul Eleuthera's getting. And most of the polls were right in line. Like it was, they mostly had the Liberals up 2%, 3%, 4%. And that's what happens, And the problem with the Liberal types that voted for them is the people like us that are like libertarians, again, conservatives, or the type of person that would go to a Paul Eleuthera rally, they're pissed off. They're angry, right? Yeah. They want to do something. But the people that are happy with the status quo, I know I've got friends in Canada that are just liberals. They weren't going to go out. They weren't going to go to a Carney rally. They were just going to sit at home, walk their dogs, live their comfortable lives, and go vote liberal. You know?
They were the elbows up people. You saw the crazy analogy, and
Stupid. You know, so I actually do that once, little tweets once in a while on Twitter.
yeah,
Right. I'll do stuff like, I saw something that actually closing down some, car part manufacturing plant in Ontario, and 500 people are going to lose their jobs, which obviously you don't want to see. But
no,
there's some liberal politician, she's writing this. Oh, this is horrible. And I'll just respond like, elbows up.
elbows up, baby. Elbows
Yeah,
up.
way to go. Yeah. So
Yeah, you guys brought it on yourself. All right, so let's talk about the book. We gotta end off here, but what else can we? Yeah, go ahead.
With the book, with oil and gas,
Yeah,
I still think oil and gas can go lower, because I think we might have a recession, right?
Mhm.
But again, I really like the Alberta oil sands play, because my opinion is either you guys get independence or maybe the Conservatives do get back in,
yeah,
right? And what I want to see is things be very like basically you have the so these are good, Suncor and these other companies are solid companies.
yeah,
And then if they get the other advantage of, okay, pipelines are going to be built in the States because either you guys are controlling yourselves or the Conservatives come in, then they can also increase, production astronomically. And then so they have, the oil price will rebound off the recession low, plus you can increase production, right? So, and I think that's going to be a big catalyst. I don't really own them right now, but that's something like, again, maximum pessimism. The best time to buy oil was when it was negative. Remember when it went negative during COVID?
Yeah.
And there's another oil sands company I talk about in the book called Athabasca, ATH, in Toronto. It's like $5 now. It was 10 cents during that. Yeah, you could have made 50 times on your money. And I bought it at 10 cents, and I made some money on it. And I sold it too early. Then I bought it back higher, and then I sold it again. I sold it about where it is now, but I always kick myself. I'm like, if I just would have gone into a coma in 2 years, for 2 years, Yeah. So
well, hindsight is
2020,
right? It's obviously way easier to see it after the fact, but
so
obviously things are okay living in the Bahamas, and maybe I'll have to come out and check out the Bahamas. I think that I need to stay here because I believe that Alberta is that opportunity, and we are. Let's just use the pessimism analogy. Really, we're on this sinking ship, and if we can separate and we can build some walls around what we consider Alberta, I think that we have this a great opportunity to become a massive force in the world.
Yeah, and I think too, like I have to tell you from my perspective is, if I didn't already live in the Bahamas and I've been here for decades and I'm kind of settled here now, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like cold weather, but if you had to make me live somewhere, I like if Alberta separated, like I even with the weather, I would prefer to live there than any place in the States, because I think you would have this huge amount of opportunity as well. And like in terms of coming down here, I don't know if they have it anymore, but in the winter when it's kind of the high season, I remember for a while, WestJet was doing a direct flight from Calgary to Nassau. So you don't have to fly through Toronto or whatever. Right.
Nice.
So I don't know if that's still the case, and it was great because I used to speak at conferences in Calgary.
Yeah.
Said having to connect through Toronto and it takes forever and it wastes half your day. That was like a 5-hour direct flight,
Yeah.
So that's that's which is not that far. That's basically what it takes to get from New York to San Francisco, right? So anyhow, but no, I agree with you. I think like if Alberta were to separate, there'd be a huge amount of opportunity. I don't know if it's still going to happen, because the issue is too is this: how fast does the Carney government fall apart? Like I said, if it's the UK, that election is not even a year old, and Starmer's people have hated him for a while now, right?
Right.
So like Farage's Reform Party is way ahead in the polls. Like
I showed Farage's a part of Farage's speech last night, and man, that guy's going to be kicking some butt. I mean, obviously the UK. I mean, they absolutely hate the state that they've put themselves into.
Oh, and then obviously there's the stuff with the grooming gangs, and
right.
Then all the illegal immigration, and like I think people have just kind of had enough there.
I hope so.
I wish the Conservative Party there would just call it quits and join with Farage, right? Because I think they're almost like done at this point,
Right.
So like, because again, they're like we're talking about the wishy-washy conservatives in Canada. That's what Boris
Correct.
Johnson. That's what all the conservatives are in the UK now as well, right?
Right.
In the United States, I know people think because the way he talks, and he is very conservative on, say, immigration or the social issues, like transgender stuff, whatever. Trump is not a conservative. Like economically, with the tariffs, with government spending, he's not a conservative. So,
right.
And by the way, that's the difference between him and Farage. Farage was a trader, in the city in London. Yeah. He's really pro free trade. Like part of what people don't understand about Brexit is, and I guess enough on this note, a lot of Brexit wasn't like, being xenophobic or whatever. A lot of Brexit was, no, like right now we're kind of stuck just trading with Europe, right? Because we're part of the European Union.
Right.
It's like, no, we can, especially with all the commonwealths that we have, and we had this empire, we can trade with Africa, we can trade with the United States, we can trade with Canada, we can trade with New Zealand, Australia, Asia, India, we can trade with all these different places, but we're kind of like handcuffed right now by being in the European Union, So, so like I would like it. I don't know why they don't do something like this, but I would like if all the old British Commonwealth type countries, like especially the English speaking rich ones like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, if those countries kind of had some kind of little Commonwealth like trading thing, I think that would be great. But I don't know what's going to happen. Right? I was actually laughing last thing about Carney when he had, because people say he's not really Canadian. He lived in the UK. He was head of the Bank of England, and he had Prince Charles speak, right? And Prince Charles or whatever, he's a globalist or whatever. But I was laughing in a way. I was like, well, Canada did join the UK again. It might not be that bad because Farage is going to win in 4 years. Right.
Not a bad idea. Not a bad. Well,
better than what we got now.
Better than what we got now. 100%.
And by the way, you have a good premier down there too. Because again, being from Ontario, I cannot stand Doug Ford. His brother was awesome, by the way, but I cannot stand him.
Yeah. No, I mean he's certainly not a progressive or a conservative, but he's the Sino, what we call the conservative in name only.
Well, I think too. You're talking about political savvy, and I said that Poilievre has poor political savvy.
Yeah,
I think Ford has very good political savvy. Like the way he called the election, he was like talking trash about Trump. He knew he was going to win, right? Yeah. But I think actually this is the miscalculation he made on that. I don't know if you watch the Pleb and all these kind of like YouTube guys, the conservative YouTube guys. I
know the Pleb, but I don't watch him. Yeah.
I like him because he's funny. And there's the other guy, Moose on the list. All those guys.
Moose on the list, yeah.
Yeah, he's in BC, right? But all of those guys, they all hate Ford, and they're all going to work against him. And a lot of the real conservatives, what I'm trying to say is I think Ford wants to be leader. That's why he didn't really help Poilievre. He wants to run for prime minister. But I think what happens when he goes to the nomination, I think he'll lose because I think all the real conservatives will just like work against him or something.
Right. Right.
So I can't stand him. And I don't know. All he does is talk about LCBO and booze. I mean, how much is I live on the island. I like to have a few drinks, but I was like, this guy must just go home and just start getting sloshed.
Well, like his brother, I guess, but
his brother is funner though.
Yeah, he was probably a little bit looser on the whole drugs and booze. So
and his brother was a real conservative. So
yeah, he was.
Yeah. In terms of his politics. Anyhow, man, I think.
All right, so how do people get your book? You said that
the easiest way, obviously, is this, you have a lot of Canadian followers, I'm sure. It's Amazon.ca, Amazon.com. I have a special offer right now on profitfrompessimism.com. That if you buy the book and you show me and you want to do a lifetime subscription, if you like my stuff that much, I'm doing $200 off a lifetime subscription. So profitfrompessimism.com. That's the newsletter, right? But the book is called Mega Returns: Profit from Pessimism. And like I said, that's on Amazon. It is also on newsmax.com. And I also write for something it's called Financial Intelligence Report for them. And they have a deal where they'll give you the book for free. And then you can also get Financial Intelligence Report at a 40% discount, right? So basically the book's 35 US or 30 US, sorry. And Financial Intelligence Report's about 110. I think you can get it for like 65 in the deal. So essentially you'll basically get Financial Intelligence Report with the book thrown in for free,
Oh, nice. Yeah,
so that's
okay. So here's your website. I'm just showing your website, profitforpessimism.com. And it looks like, okay, awesome.
Yeah, that we have a pop-up with that special lifetime offer. So, and what I do is I do weekly videos. Right now, I'm doing something pretty cool where I have
Mhm.
I have two little portfolios. One started with 30,000 US, the other 5,000 US, and it's a mixture of my trading, these little stock deals I do IPOs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing, the reason I'm using such small amounts is I want to show, look, I'm doing things, excuse me, where I'm showing that the average person can make money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, you have to be a billionaire, you have to have
Right.
all this money, right? So, yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate talking to you. It was a real pleasure to hear your perspective, and I love to hear an expat on your thoughts on Canada. Hey, one of the other things I want to ask you about, you were talking about we were talking about obviously independence, Alberta independence,
Yeah.
and that you do some speaking engagements. And I don't know if you talked to Fergus about this, but we're looking at doing a I guess, a speaking engagement in regard to independence here in Alberta,
I would come speak to
coming
that.
up in September. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, tell me actually, because if I do go back to Canada, September is when I'll be there. So I can just
yeah.
fly from Toronto to
Okay.
Alberta. So, and actually, one of my best friends,
Yeah.
it was she used to work for me. I run my booths at trade shows.
Yeah.
She was actually married to Alondra Johnson. She's Alondra Johnson's ex-wife. I don't know
Okay.
if you remember him. He was like a Hall
No.
of Fame linebacker for the state.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, anyhow, I haven't seen her in years, so I could use that excuse to see her too. But,
Oh, fantastic.
anyhow, no, I would love to come. Right. And by the way, I used to do these trade shows. I haven't been to Calgary in since 2011 in 14 years. You know, so
Well, you can come and see all of our homeless and how unsafe our
it
sea
is now.
train is. But
Well, that's what Toronto's like too. I won't even go to Toronto anymore because it makes me sick.
yeah, it's pretty sad.
Last thing before we go, just have
Yeah.
another funny little story. Did you know who Evan Solomon is? The
Yeah,
guy.
for sure I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he ran. I think he won his seat. But did
Yeah,
you
I think
see
you did.
that picture of him when he was running?
No.
He had a picture. There's a picture of Carney, liberal picture in the background.
Yeah.
No, you got to see it. There's all kinds of like feces and pee and all this stuff on the wall behind him, and they're like, "You just summed up like your policies."
I'll have to look for it.
It was not like dog. It was like a human. It was like a bum that probably took a dump.
Oh.
Oh my god.
Well, he was a piece of work, that Evan Solomon. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, when you're too corrupt, even for the CBC, that's bad. Because
Exactly, right?
I don't know what he was doing, but he was like he did stuff with art.
Yeah.
And he basically would then pitch his guests on CBC the art, and then he would take a commission off it.
Really?
Total conflict of interest.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, stick around if you don't mind, David, just for another minute. I'm just going to say goodbye to our audience, and you and I can catch up, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time.
I hope I didn't talk too much. Sometimes I tend to, I can go on and on. So
I love it, man. I love it. This is really what I like to do. Is I like to just have a conversation with people and get their different perspectives on things. So I appreciate it.
And just to say, I appreciate this because usually I'm just talking about. I know we talk about my book and stocks and investing, but having this whole angle, Alberta independence and Canadian politics, and my kind of unique perspective as someone who moved 20 years ago because I thought things were going to get bad. I really appreciate being able to kind of express all this. Yeah. Right. So,
That's
and by the way,
awesome.
my father played a large role in that. He was always like, "Get the hell out of this country, blah, blah." Hey, if I can tell you one last thing before you do that outro, and this is the way. So I'm really like the first generation Canada because my dad was actually born in UK.
Right.
My last name's Skarica. My grandfather was from Yugoslavia, from Bosnia. My grandmother was from Austria. My grandparents on my mom's side are Polish Jews. Yeah. And I always tell people the story that they all moved to Canada because they wanted a better life because after the war, they just didn't see it happening, and especially being Polish Jews, they did not want to live in Poland, obviously, afterwards, right? After the Holocaust. But they're all moved to Canada for a better life. And I tell people, Canadians have a thing where it's like, or a lot of Canadians have a thing where like, they still think the country is good or something, which I don't think anymore, And I'm like, I moved to the Bahamas because I was like, what I do for a living, working online, trading. I don't have to pay taxes down here. The weather's better. There isn't all this PC culture down here. I just moved to get a better life. And like you're talking about Alberta independence or moving down here or whatever, I think people have to be open to that because they should see that Canada is not the same country it was 40 years ago. I'm sorry, it's just not, you know?
Well, we talked about this, and I talk about it on a regular basis, is that people are fearful, and the fear keeps them from doing stuff, right? It's that, what is it called? Paralyzation. So you're I can't remember how the saying goes, but essentially you're paralyzed because you're terrified of making a move. And Canadians, I think for the large majority, and you and I talked about it already, but the elbows up crowd are completely brainwashed, and they believe whatever CBC says, right? So they I don't want them over in the Bahamas if I came to move there anyway, and I don't want them in Alberta. Let's put it that way.
They wouldn't move here. And here's the thing about the liberal type places, and this has happened in, a lot of people thought, oh, these Californians are all moving to Texas or Florida. They're going to, those plaplaces are still voting Republican because the type of people moving aren't the raging liberals. So anyone who is moving from Ontario or Quebec or Manitoba or whatever to Alberta or Saskatchewan, I think they're going to be the right kind of people. I don't think they're going to be like the elbows up.
No,
like LGBTQ flag on their house. I don't think
that'll come after. When we're rolling the dough and the streets are paved with gold, and then they'll all be wanting to join Alberta. But we'll deal with that on a different day. So thanks very much, David. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's good to meet you. Take care.
Nice to meet you too. Yeah.
Okay, stand by, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Make sure to get more eyeballs in this information. Share it out to your friends and family, and we'll talk to you very soon. God bless. Take care. Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate your participation in freedom in Canada. Share this information and help others to wake up. God bless.